Okay, good morning and welcome to New World Metals and the Perth leg. It's great to be here in Perth. Firstly, I just want to apologise to all our live streaming people out there. We are here just a little bit late. As we all know, being most of us from Perth, when it rains in Perth, it really disrupts us. You know, we don't really like it too much. If it was in Melbourne, we'd be right on time. But over here, we've got such a wonderful transport industry and public transport as well. It's so easy to move around this great city when it's raining. So anyway, a little bit late. So to all those guys and people out there that are live streaming, we're on. And it's good to see that you've taken an interest in this show. And as a lot of you may know, this is just one of the three legs that the New World Metals Conference is involved with. So next Tuesday we'll be in Melbourne, and then on Thursday we'll be in Sydney. And we really like this concept because we give an opportunity to a lot of the companies that are involved in this critical minerals industry to showcase themselves to a real diverse and widespread group of investors and industry people. So it's great to be here in Perth. It's just a little change to the program. If you have a look at 11:45 a.m, Nickel X was meant to be presenting. Stewie and I got a call late yesterday afternoon from Matt Gorsey. Unfortunately, he's unwell, so he's pulled out. So we thought, oh, what an opportunity to get a company on board to give a presentation in that position. Madly ringing around. Unfortunately, everyone was busy. And Stewie said, I got an idea. I'll ring David Self. Now, David Self is the CEO of TG Metals. Their code's TG6. Stewie rings him, and David doesn't answer the phone. Now, to a lot of you think, oh, yeah, who cares? He missed the call. But Stuart McDonald is the major shareholder of TG Metals and TG6. So there's an expectation from Stuart, you know, when I ring you, you are going to answer. He gets a text message back from David, says, oh, sorry, Stewie, sorry. I can't answer the call, I'm really busy at the moment. What's up? And Stewie said, oh, tomorrow we've got this opportunity at 11:45 a.m. I need a company to get on the stage and give a 15-minute presentation. And you've got all that exciting nickel exploration that you're doing at the moment. What about you take this opportunity? And Dave wrote back and said, no, I can't do it. We thought, oh, well, that was a little bit blunt and direct and short with the response. But anyway, well, today we woke up and guess who's in a trading halt? TG6 on the back of their Lake Johnson drilling results. So Stewie, the major shareholder, and myself sitting in the top 5, we've got pretty big smiles on our faces, and we're very much looking forward to Thursday morning when we get to see what the trading halt was all about. So unfortunately, as a result of that, no one is presenting in the Nickel X position. So Chrissy's got a bit of time up her sleeve. Eddie can speak for 20 odd minutes, which he'll enjoy doing. And that's the little adjustment to the program. So as you guys know, a conference like this doesn't exist without great sponsors. As I just mentioned, Eddie, we're really lucky to have Argonaut. They support us in so many ways at so many different events, at our Singapore show, this New World Metals show. Tomorrow they'll be our major sponsor at our RIU Good Oil conference. So we really appreciate the support from Argonaut, Eddie, Wendy, and the whole team there. And the Lin partners, great relationship with those guys. They're based in New York. They pay us money to be sponsors, but they never come out to Australia to come to our show. So it's a perfect relationship that we enjoy. Thanks to the Lin partners. Our social suite, ESG, very important. I'm sure Eddie will touch on ESG possibly in his presentation, but it's great to have Rob from Social Suite here. They're partners with us at lots of our conferences, so we really appreciate their support. I can see Rachel sitting in the crowd. We're lucky to have Cooper Partners back. This is the 3rd year that they have been our barista sponsor. It's good to see that some of you are sitting there with your Cooper Partners coffee cups in front of you. On a morning like this, everyone needs a coffee. I haven't had one yet, so I'm looking forward to getting off the stage and sneaking down there shortly to grab one after Eddie's presentation, because I have heard it's going to be quite entertaining. Really pleased to get Benchmark on board this year. So they're part of our show today, and Melbourne on Tuesday and Sydney on Thursday. Obviously, they're the leaders when it comes to talking about the market conditions from the supply and demand side in relation to those commodities that are associated with this EV world. So looking forward to hearing Cameron this morning. And then there's our media partners, Resources Rising Star, Resources Roadhouse, Chapter 1, who are managing the live streaming, and we welcome the Share Cafe on as well today. So that's our sponsors and partners, and we really appreciate their support. But one thing I really wanted to mention is to all the representatives from the ASX listed resources companies who support vertical events, not just at the New World Metals Conference, but at our RIU events. Thank you, because what Stewie and I have noticed in the last couple of months is that there is a lot of competition now in the conference space. There seems to be a conference every second week. There's 3 different conferences on this week. But as a lot of you know, we've got the brand, we've got the reputation, and we pride ourselves on trying to do the best for our ASX listed resources and energy clients. So I hope that we can continue such strong relationships with those companies that are supporting us, and we look forward to your support for many years to come. So without any further ado, pass over to the great Chrissy Morrissey and look forward to a great day.
Thanks, Jaxon. Yes. You know what else we've got too? We've got a sense of humour in this room as well. So we know that the business of investing is very serious business because we all like a little bit of money, but we also like to have a bit of fun. We play hard as well. I was worried, boys, about wearing my running shoes today, but then I saw you 2 boys in beanies and I thought, that's okay. I think I've got the dress code perfectly right. Can you lift your game? We've got a couple of new investors in the room today. So who, just a show of hands, who's this first conference, a first vertical events conference? I know Don and a couple of the other guys down the back there have come along with Steve and some of their mates. It's great to have you in the room, and we'd love you to share the love as well as you go around. You mentioned Rachel Jaxon. Good, another reason to go down and see Rachel. You know that bottle of wine that you mentioned? It's Grange, 2013, so it's worth $1,000. So if you don't drink it and you win it, you just need to put your business card in. There's another good investment. And young Tyson is down there doing the coffees for us, our personal barista today, and he thinks he's going to be doing about 400 to 500. So go down and put him to work and put your business card in. 24 presentations today, 24 really good presentations. I'm really looking forward to sitting here with you through all of them and seeing what there is to offer. But I think one of the first things that we like to do for you always at these conferences is give you a little bit of an insight into how you can use your money wisely. So we've got one of the wisest blokes we know about to come and have a chat with us. While he makes his way up here, I'll wax lyrical about him. Eddie from Argonaut, would you please make him welcome? He is the co-founder of Argonaut, extensive experience in the execution of M&A and capital raising for both public and private companies, an active originator of domestic and cross-border transactions for small cap through large multinational entities. Now, outside of usual business, because we like to know a little bit more about our investing community, Eddie is a huge, who would he barrack for, this fellow, do you reckon?
The Dockers.
Oh, you just say it yourself. I was going to get them to guess. Dockers. He's a Dockers boy, and he also owns a horse stable. Is that one working for you? Is that okay?
Is that working now? No.
How about you take this one, because I reckon a voice, you know. So would you please make him welcome? He's got 15 minutes, but I have a feeling you'll take 20.
G'day. Thanks, Chrissy. Yeah, I do own a horse stud, and my talk today is primarily about where you sleep at a racetrack. But what we're also doing, we'll cover some other important topics like The Voice. I'm going to talk about Qantas and Alan Joyce, the RBA Governor, Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, South Park. I had a great weekend on South Park. So I went to the Sydney Oz Festival. If ever people haven't had a chance to do the Sydney Oz Festival down at Busselton, do yourself a favour and go down there. So Argonaut, as part of its ESG policy, supports not just football and cricket and the races, but we also support the arts. And I've got to say, what a weekend. It's absolutely fabulous. It's a great place to be down in the southwest, but being there supporting the people who make an effort to put the screenplays on. And we sat there on the first night and we watched a movie, we call it The Rooster. And so if you get a chance to watch The Rooster, it's very good about men's health. And then we watched a show called Monolith. And if you ever watch Monolith, don't do it if you're in a bad mood. But it really is strange. It's one person doing the whole movie. $640,000 was the total budget, and it really is wonderful to be shown over the world. So we're also going to talk a little bit about my evil twin, Neil Warburton, and but no, we won't do that because Stewie doesn't want me to talk about that. So let me talk about what we're really going to talk about today, and it's the annual scorecard. And what we do about that is looking at what's really happened with the companies in this room in the last 12 months, what's really happened with the new World Metals, and also we can put it in comparison with the old world metals. It's really interesting. I think most people believe this transition from hydrocarbon to battery metals and reducing global warming is something which is here to stay, and this is a real transformation. And often, we sort of sit back and look at what are the things which really changed GDP in the world, and the Industrial Revolution was the first big one. The recovery after World War II and rebuilding the world after World War II was the second biggest one. And then perhaps the urbanisation of China being the things which have really changed global GDP and people's standard of living. Well, we expect that this transition from hydrocarbons and the impact of global warming and the sort of moving towards net zero are the transition will be much bigger than what we believe the urbanisation of China was, because at the end of the day, it was one country, but this is affecting the whole world. But I've got to say, one of the interesting stats is that consumption of metals between 1995 and 2020, 90% of all consumption of metals was consumed by China. So it's a really interesting thing, right? And that deglobalization which we're facing now is something which is going to be of interest going forward. We also talk about avoiding the bathtub. And what people want to know what I mean by avoiding the bathtub, and that's really looking at the Lassonde curve. And we'll talk about today how Argonaut decided, anecdotal evidence, how companies' share price performed. And this is sort of companies which make discoveries through to commissioning. But we wanted to make sure that what we were saying anecdotally was actually real. So we did an empirical study from 1 January 2000 to 31 December 2022. So 22 years of all companies on ASX which went through a development phase. And we wanted to look at what actually happened during that period of time, what companies did well, what companies didn't do well. And what those companies did well, let's identify those things and perhaps pass on those lessons to the people in this crowd. So we all hope everyone here makes a great discovery over the next 2 to 3 years. So let me talk about what actually are the new age metals. And I think these are the 10 which people most often regard as the new age metals, but we've got to keep it a little bit real. And I'd often talk about trying to keep things real. And it reminds me of a very good joke, but I'm not allowed to tell it. Stewie banned me for this joke. And I got to say, on Stewie and Jaxon, it's just really appreciate what RIU does, and obviously, the great work Chrissy does. We actually get to travel around Australia and do this presentation, and sometimes my jokes don't always work, so I've just got to be very careful. So, but keeping things real, in 2022, the value of coal production was 10 times larger than the production of all those the 10 new age metals. Just think about that, a little bit of context, right? And people go, oh, we got to stop coal mining. Well, I don't think so. If you want to stop coal mining, you're going to kill a lot of people. And I don't think killing people is a great thing for ESG. But we do have to move towards a cleaner environment and reducing our carbon footprint. The other point about this list of 10 is that copper once again dwarfs all the others. So lithium's made a big burst in the last 3 years, but it's fair to say it's a long way from being anything close to what coal production is. So we always look at, what do commodities do? And this is I reckon, really interesting chart. I don't really like the trend here. Let me see if I can get this little, here we go. How about this trend going like that all the way up there? So potentially in 2024, we might all be negative, but what we can see over those 3 years, and it's quite amazing, is that the only 3 commodities, and I've got here new world metals, but also we include the main commodities of oil and gas. The only 3 commodities which are 3 for 3 being up positive, and this is calendar years, and this is US dollars, is gold, uranium, and crude oil. It's a really interesting thing about uranium, and I often talk about uranium because I'm a massive fan of uranium. But people consider it an old world commodity. But if new world metals are all about reducing the carbon footprint and addressing global warming, then surely uranium is a new world metal. But when we look at this here, we see there's not many companies this year, or not many commodities addressing this transition, which are actually positive. Sure, lithium's been the worst performer, but over the 3 years, lithium is still been the best performer. But it is very interesting looking at this, and I think it sort of reflects the global economy more than it does the actual demand and the trend towards energy transition. We also, this next slide's a slide which we quite often talk about, but there's one change to this slide, and this slide's just talk about where we think the cycle's going. And this is ignoring the demand side, right? This is just the supply side, and it's fair to say Argonaut focuses very much on the supply side. Demand will lead to the big investment banks, although with Hayden Bairstow joining us, he has a very strong view as to demand side advisory work and research. So we might see that change. But when we look at the demand side, the supply side, we do think it's very much dampened and it's going to be a lot slower response. I mentioned deglobalization. People are now concerned about having all their products coming from China, but we don't have the smelting or the refining capabilities in many other countries. You know, take rare earths for an example. We've got one refinery being built finally in Australia, which has taken longer and costing more, which is pretty typical of doing things in Australia. But otherwise, it's all dominated outside of China. So there's a number of whole things in China which they dominate the supply of the products after they consume the metals. And that's a concern to everyone. So we think that deglobalization will cause a slowing down because there is no capacity to actually create the products which we want to use. The multi-year approval process, and this is a slide from the International Energy Agency. And what it shows here is it's about 16 or 17 years, they believe, from the early stage of exploration, making a discovery through to steady state production. I'm certain we can do things quicker here in WA, but it does sort of indicate how long it's taking now. I think we all understand the challenges we face in WA. Only recently with the Heritage Access Agreement and the Heritage Act, which was, as I describe, as a complete cluster. But I think everyone in this room, and I know for Argonaut particularly, no one wants to see another Juukan Gorge fiasco, but at the same time, we need a faster approval process. Nationalisation of assets through Africa, South America are a real concern to people. You know, you don't want to go somewhere there, take all the risks of exploring, and then all of a sudden the government comes out and says, well, we're going to take 10% of the asset, 20% of the asset, 30% of the asset, or perhaps we might take the lot. So that's a real challenge for people. And the last point is, and this is pretty obvious, but those easy discoveries at surface don't exist anymore, right? They're hard to find. And so now what we're finding is the ore bodies are blind. We need advanced exploration, geophysics to identify those, and a lot more drilling to identify deposits which are blind at surface. So for all these reasons, we're very strong on the sector. We're very strong on the outlook for commodities. As a firm, that's what we do, is commodities and resources, and it's just a great place to be. This is part of the scorecard. What are the best performing companies in the ASX Resources 300 Index? And once again, we're dominated by the old world, which is very interesting. So other than Liontown at the top, and we all know what's happened to Liontown, what a great story, and we'll see how due diligence goes with Albemarle, but hopefully we'll see a lot of cash being released. I think it's $6.3 billion back. Hopefully those people who take those profits invest it back into the sector and all the companies in this room. But other than that, we see uranium being a dominant together with gold. So it's quite an interesting sort of to see the performance. And it's a little bit sobering along with the prices of the commodities. I love the next slide. And we do that, and we did this as effectively as last night. And what it shows, and it's interesting, right? So what it shows here is 2021, 2022, 2023. And what we do is we look at, if you put $10,000 in at the start of the year in the Small Resources Index, what's it worth today? So that's not the 300 index, it's a smaller index, which is some of the companies in this room might be included in. We look at the old world commodities back at slide 5, those old world commodities. The new world commodities, look at that. So you're down 23%. You just invested $10,000 evenly across all those commodities for the year. New world companies, including Azure. So wonderful result there, and Azure do such a great performance. It's actually skews the results. So what we did was we looked at all the companies excluding Azure, and you're still up 20-odd%. So what it tells us is The market believes those new world commodity prices are going to rebound, and also tells us that investors should put money into the companies because, once again, the leverage on actually investments far exceeds the performance of the underlying commodity price, and that's always typically been the case. The next part of the presentation, and I really sort of enjoy doing this part of the presentation because it was very good work done in our office by our research team and a guy called Ben Chamberlain, who, by the way, came second on the Sydney the surf run on the weekend. So, yeah, Ben Chamberlain came second. It was a very good effort. Next time he can come first. So hopefully he comes first. But great effort by Ben. So what we talk about here is avoiding the bathtub, and most people have seen this type of this sort of graph here, and this bit here is where you announce your scoping study, and typically we go into a bit of a tub here, often regarded as a study phase slump. So as I said when we started today, we looked at 176 companies in a 22-year period which went through the development phase. And the key finding was the correlation between the release of your study results and the negative share price performance until ultimately the project was successfully commissioned. So this is a quite interesting sort of phenomenon which we saw anecdotally, but we struggle with companies to raise money during the exploration phase. And for us at Argonaut, we've got 10 people who are either geologists, mining engineers, or metallurgists on staff. And one of the key things that we use Leapfrog and MinePro, and one of the key things our firm does is try and identify these early discoveries which will become mines. And we say you should raise money then with that excitement in the exploration phase. But many companies, I don't know how many times people say to us, "Oh, no, we're undervalued. We're undervalued. No, we'll go. Once we put our results out, we'll go up." It doesn't happen, and it just doesn't happen. And so, so if one thing I just leave you from today is that take advantage of the excitement during the exploration phase. And why is that? It's because in that phase, people aren't concerned about, what's the CapEx? How are you going to fund it? Is your management team got the right capabilities to take the project forward? And you might think you're good, but most of the people outside don't think you're most really good unless you've got that track record, right? What are the risks of getting this approved? What are the other issues? Is it metallurgically able to extract the commodity out of the ore? All those things go in that study phase. And at the start, the great thing about the exploration phase is it's about greed. People go, how big is this discovery going to be? How much money am I going to make? And that's when you take advantage of that absolute greed factor, right? And that demand, that exciting factor, because people aren't worried at that point in time, because really it's very hard to stuff up a project in exploration phase. But it's quite easy to do things wrong in the study phase. There's very few positive surprises during a study phase. The best typically you see a project's at the scoping study. That's when people haven't quite done the work to make sure that things actually, you can extract, you can do this, you can get your approvals. So I just want to sort of emphasize to you that take advantage of the greed factor and don't try and wait until you put your CapEx numbers out and the metallurgical results out, because people don't, by that stage, they're waiting. Most institutional investors, sorry, we'll go back here. If I can go back. Oh, look, I'll keep going forward because I don't know how to go backwards. I just point forward. That's what you have to do as a stockbroker, just point forward. This graph here is a really interesting graph. So this is a graph which, again, shows some interesting information here. This is the study of the companies over the 22-year period. The high capex ones is the yellow. The high raised capital ratio is the orange, or whatever colour that is. And this colour here is the ones which had a low market cap and a high market cap ratio. So what we're trying to say there is that if you have to raise more than your market cap, you're in a bit more challenged than you would be otherwise. What this shows is that the longer you wait to raise the money after you put out a study, the longer it actually takes you to get back to where you were beforehand. So typically we see those people who wait and try and raise money post a study, takes them 4 to 6 months to get back to somewhere where they were before. So it's a really interesting sort of graph, and this is just what those 176 companies did. But of course, there were some great performers. And this is one of the things I want to get through to you, is how do you avoid that study phase slump? And there was 4 characteristics which really came to the fore on this part. The first one, and I know it sounds counterintuitive, and I'm sure it sounds like it's good for stockbrokers, but it's true. The biggest correlation factor that companies perform well is those which are highly capitalized. So the more money you have, the better you perform. You make better decisions, and people don't think you come raise all the time. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that, and De Grey and Bellevue have been great stories. So De Grey's raised $389 million since its discovery, and Bellevue's raised $386 million since its discovery. But those, even though it sounds counterintuitive, the more money you raise during the exploration phase, the less dilutive it is. The second one we always hear about, that dual strategy of exploration, continued exploration, along with doing your study. Because as I said, there's very few positive surprises during the study phase. But in exploration, a good example is Papillon, and those people remember Papillon. It was in Mali. They started a study. I can't remember the name of the project they started the study on. But they continued exploration, and they made a discovery called Fekola after they started the scoping study. Fekola last year produced 602,000 ounces at $800 an ounce. It's a world-class deposit, but and of course Papillon's share price went super, and everyone did very well out of it. But the only reason it did that was because it continued the exploration phase, and it was a company run by Mark Connolly, if I remember, as MD, and Ian Middlemas as chairman. The other one is joint ventures, and I'll just show you some interesting stuff on joint ventures in a moment. But what the joint venture does, it typically brings to your balance sheet capability, and also brings to your capability, because the people who farm in, it's strategic parties, they've actually already been there and done that. So they address all those shortcomings which people are concerned about in the study phase slump. Lots of people who make discoveries, remember, all bodies don't choose their owners. That's one thing to always remember. Sorry, Stewie. Okay, 5 minutes. I've got that on here, Stewie. Then joint ventures. And then the next thing I talk about is commencing long lead items early and doing that sort of work early. So there's companies which have been really successful at effectively camouflaging the study phase by continuing exploration and not saying they're doing the study phase. And a great example of that's Bellevue. And if people know about Bellevue, while they were exploring, and so just so you know, idea of Bellevue did 7 resource upgrades while it was doing its study. I think it raised 10 times, raised $386 million. But during that period, it dewatered the old mine. And these 2 examples are both underground operations, so maybe that's where you can do it more easily. They dewatered it, they did the decline, and called an exploration decline. Yeah, sure. It's built exactly the size to take their trucks out in the future. And they've produced multiple work phases. So as soon as they said, here's our bankable feasibility study, they're actually ready to go almost mining. Now they just need GR to finish building the plant. So I'll jump through these here because they're the case studies. I've talked about those. But De Grey's often been called as overcapitalised, right? And it continued exploration. To give you an idea, they made the initial discovery was Brolga, then Aquila, then Crow, then Falcon, Brolga South, Yukon, Eagle, Crow's Nest. And then they've got the depth extensions of those. So amazing story. Stock's up nearly 1,200% since they made the original discovery. It's been a really great story, this one here. But it's that strategy of avoiding the bathtub. Gold Road realised they were really good at exploring, but they didn't really have the management team. Brought Goldfields in. Stock's been up 280% since then. Interesting enough, they were really well capitalised beforehand as well. And at the time they announced the DFS, it was a kick in the guts for Argonaut because we had $175 million arranged to do an equity placement, and our partners now, a firm we joined with, PCF, had arranged nearly $450 million of debt at that point in time. So instead, they knocked that back and did a deal at MPV, reflecting MPV. Bellevue I've talked about. This is a company which has done early works, highly capitalised, just a really, and continued exploration. So, that company's up, I think, best part of, 1,800%, or is it 4,000%? So that's an amazing effort by these guys. And if you know what this management team's doing now, they've gone into a company called Orteco. So the same guys who did this have gone to Orteco, bought a great project called Green, I think it's Green Copper, a bit like Green Gold, in Canada, and that looks like a story to be involved with in the future. People have heard me talk about the best undeveloped projects which Argonaut released. It's a great publication. It just looks at technical projects, and it's agnostic to management, balance sheets, funding requirements, commodity. But one reason I brought this in, because this is a study of the companies which you talk about typically going through, the undeveloped projects going through that bathtub. What was really interesting about this study, we went back and then also as part of our overall study over 22 years, we went back and studied the first 5 years and what happened in those first 5 years. What's amazing is the best 3 performers all did joint ventures. You know, and I know people running these companies don't want to give up control of their asset and etc. But just think about your shareholders. The best 3 companies, performing companies that period did joint ventures. Interesting enough, at that point in time, we did read this a fair while ago, was that 4 projects, only 5 of the 28 best picks in that period weren't mines, and 4 of those weren't because of geopolitical risks. Those geopolitical risks, Berkeley, Salamanca project in Spain, the rare earths project of Peak. What's the other one? I'll just go there because it's quite interesting. Those projects, Myanmar Metals, Baldwin project, polymetallic project in Myanmar, and Cradle Resources, niobium project in Tanzania, still aren't developed, and there's still no pathway for those being developed. So geopolitical risks are something which is very, I think it's very significant. So I'm down to the last 30 seconds, and I just wanted to leave with you just one little last bit, because there's nothing like a free opportunity or free lunch when I'm involved. Argonaut's got a great team. I mentioned we've got 10 technical people. There's a lot of grey hair there. There's a lot of bald heads there too, actually. There's a good blend of youth and experience, but as I said, there's 10 of them which are technically trained. We're global, we're local, but we've got global reach, being licensed in Canada, the US, Australia, and formerly had an office in Hong Kong. And if you're not sure what to do with your money, or your family's money, Argonaut Funds Management business, which is run by Dave Franklin, the Argonaut Natural Resources Fund, and the Gold Fund run by Ben Clifford, who's joined us from Goldman Sachs, 2 of the best performing funds in Australia. So everyone, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I will have my views on Alan Joyce and Qantas and the other matters for later. So thank you very much.
Just stay where you are. Stay where you are, everyone, for 2 seconds. I want to get a picture of the great man with his audience. You ready? Go. Good on you. Oh, I got your skinny side. Don't you worry about that. You can go running with Ben Chamberlain. There you go. Maybe you would have come first if you hadn't kept him in that small room doing all that analysing for you. Is Ben up the back? Is Ben here today? He's still in that room. There. You put a big Argonaut T-shirt on him for when he wins for next year. Maybe that's it. Some great tips. Thank you so much, Eddie. Could you put your hands together again for the big man, everyone? That was great. Really, really good. And as he said, we really hope that everyone here makes a great discovery today in New World Metals. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to show you. And talking New World Metals and opportunities to see some of these emerging companies, there's Shane, can you stick up a slide for me? Because you might like to join us. This year, early this year, we went to Singapore for the very first future-facing commodities conference. It was absolutely brilliant. Argonaut were there, Tribeca were there, really, really well received by the community up there. And we did have a lot of Australians travel up and join us. I was lucky enough to be MC. The quality of the talks was brilliant. And we also had a lot of educational. Did anyone actually go from the room? Anyone come up from the room? So this is a new opportunity for you, but keep those dates in your diary, and I'll stick the slide up again during the day, because I'm sure as you see some of these companies and hear us talk a little bit more about New World Metals, it's something that you might like to come up and join us for a couple of really, really good days, education and also investment opportunities. Do we have any metallurgists and old engineers in the room between us? Do? If I said to you, columbium, would you know what that mineral was? Columbium? No. Yeah, so it can be columbium and niobium. So that's what we're going to say. One that had two words or 2 descriptors. So Charles Altshuler is going to join us. He's the CFO of emerging niobium producer Globe Metals and Mining. He's here this morning to provide an update on the company's exciting Kanyika niobium project, which is in Malawi. It's shovel ready. Something that Eddie talked about. It's fully permitted, which is really important, and it's already at the advanced stage project and it's ready to start construction. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone?
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm here to talk about our niobium project, which is critical for safe, ultra-fast battery charging. Niobium is predominantly used for ferroniobium, which is used in the production of high-strength, low-alloy steel in the construction and automotive industry, as well as the manufacture of high-pressure gas and oil pipelines due to its greater resistance to heat and corrosion and its extra strength. Just some interesting facts that if the Eiffel Tower was rebuilt today, instead of the 7,300 tons of wrought iron, you would only need 2,000 tons of high-strength, low-alloy steel, indicating its part in the world's decarbonization goals. The new game-changing market opportunity in which Globe is partaking is the niobium oxide market, which makes batteries greener, cheaper, and cleaner. If you dope niobium into a lithium-ion battery, that battery can be fully charged in less than 10 minutes at lower operating temperatures, and it increases the energy density of the battery by 200% at a lower material cost. Niobium oxide batteries can withstand 10,000 charging cycles, and a current battery that is already in production is Toshiba's niobium titanium oxide battery, which has a mileage of 320 kilometers and reaches 90% capacity after 6 minutes, and can fast charge to even after 25,000 cycles, still retains it at 80% capacity. And niobium is a critical metal, both in Australia, EU, US, Japan, and India. And it is number 3 out of 35 on the US list of critical minerals. Niobium is 5 times the price of copper. At $51,000 per ton for a 99.9% niobium oxide, this has benefited from a 200% increase since 2001. And clearly the demand up to 2030 is outweighing the supply of niobium oxide. Currently, 3 mines in the world account for 95% of the global mined niobium supply, and no new mines have been brought into production in the last 50 years. Out of the 112,000 tons of total niobium, which includes ferroniobium and niobium oxide, only around 10,000 tons are currently produced. And an excessive dependence on a single supplier country, which is Brazil, makes global consumers very vulnerable in this space. Neobec and Bayer Vista produce only ferroniobium, while CBMM produces niobium as well as ferroniobium. All 3 companies use a leach process together with electric arc furnace, which is very carbon intensive and creates significant slag. CBMM, one of the world's leading producers of niobium oxide, will be tripling their capacity by 2030 to serve this growing battery market. CBMM have already invested in current companies in this battery space using niobium oxide, such as Ekion, Battery Streak, VW Brazil, where the buses in Brazil use niobium, the electric buses, as well as lightning motorcycles. And this increase in capacity by one of the world's leaders shows that this is the time for new participants to enter this market in terms of the single supplier model. So this is the ideal opportunity for Globe to enter the market. You may question is, how do we compete with this established 50-year-old supply chain? The answer is that we have this opportunity to introduce modern and efficient mining and refinery processes versus the 50-year-old setup. We are introducing a new clean refinery process, which uses a chlorination versus the HF acid leach, and this will comply with ESG battery supply chain regulations. We can de-risk the supply chain through an alternative country being Malawi and break the current monopolistic dependence on a single source supply. We have the ability to produce at a low cost, both in our mining and refining operations, and we can take advantage of the low supply versus the high demand cycle. About our project, our Kanika niobium project in Malawi, Africa, has the potential to become the first globally significant mine in 50 years. We are shovel-ready, fully permitted, and advanced stage project covered by a mining development agreement and mining license, as well as all environmental and land approvals to start construction. Our 2012 JORC compliant mineral resource estimate is 68 million tons with a 23-year life of mine over 2 phases. Our production, as I said, occurs in Malawi, with our processing plant, the refinery, in Walvis Bay in Namibia. For those who don't know, Malawi is a conflict-free democratic country underpinned by its 2027 mining strategic plan, where mining will be the main contributor to the sustainable social, economic growth and development of the country. It is well supported by the government, and all production takes place at the mine site up to construction concentrate level, including crushing, grinding, and concentrating. We then transport that via South Africa as the most cost-effective method to Walvis Bay for the processing plants. Currently, we are looking at the EIA and scoping for the refinery to convert the niobium concentrate into a niobium oxide, metal powders, and or ferroniobium. And Namibia already has a mature regional focus on green steel, hydrogen, waste management, and with potential good skilled employees and infrastructure sharing and collaboration, makes Namibia a very good place for our refinery. We have a large resource base, 68.3 million tons on mineral resources and 33.8 million tons on ore reserves. Our development plan, we have just completed our capital raise in an entitlement offer, and this enables us to finalize the phase 1 design and establish cost estimates for operating expenses. And we are currently producing from our bulk sample, product samples for offtake agreements. We expect our first ore by Q4 2024, and that would be 720 tons of niobium oxide in our phase 1. This requires approximately $70 million US. After 3 years, we will upgrade to our full-scale plant requiring approximately $250 million US based on our 2021 definitive feasibility study, and this will produce 3,250 tons of niobium oxide at full capacity. We have a very scalable startup operations. As I explained, it's a 2-phase approach. In phase 1, we have an open pit, a free dig mining load and haul operation. We have primary jaw and secondary cone crushing, EDS and ball mill milling, and a single stage flotation. The drying of the concentrate occurs in Malawi, and it is then trucked to Namibia, where we can produce the niobium oxide. As I explained, we don't use the acid leach process. We use a chlorination process where the salt is electrolyzed to produce chlorine. The chlorine is recycled from oxidization and reduction, and the chlorination reactor means that the metals, in other words, niobium, tantalum, as well as other metals contained in the ore, such as uranium, zircon, and iron, are converted to gaseous chlorides at high temperatures, and then selective cooling gives the primary separation of these metals and metal chlorides. We then produce a greater than 99% through the batch distillation, giving us a high-grade niobium, metal oxide and powder, and the chlorine is recycled back to the chlorinator. In addition to niobium making batteries greener, cheaper, cleaner, supporting climate change, our own ESG principles are very clearly evident. We have a social and labor plan where a percentage of our turnover will be given to the local community within 20 kilometers of the mine. Not forgetting that Malawi is the 7th poorest country in the world. We will be training artisans and other disciplines to partake in the mine site. There is a river that runs through the ore body, and we will be diverting that to build a dam, giving fresh water and irrigation for the neighboring farms. And the local community will be growing their own crops, which we will use for biomass fuel. And that biomass will be used to dry the concentrate, and the biogas will then be upgraded to biomethane to replace 60% of the diesel mining fleet. In addition, we will be using solar power with battery storage, as well as hydropower using the river that runs through the ore body. And in terms of production optimization, we're moving from a 12-stage to a 4-stage flotation with EDS ball mill combination, meaning reduced power consumption and lower flotation throughput. And the chlorination process regenerates and recycles the chlorine, meaning low residue volumes and no effluent water. The 2021 definitive feasibility study showed a 1.5-year payback of our project with a 1 billion NPV, 5.6 billion revenue over the life of the mine, 3.7 billion US EBITDA of the life of the mine, and approximately 250 million in terms of capital cost plus sustaining capex over the life of the mine. We are currently now working on process improvements on our 2021 definitive feasibility study, such as moving the concentrator to 1 stage, decreasing our number of flotation reagents, introducing an EDS mill, or saving significant OPEX and CAPEX versus our original feasibility study. And most importantly, our original feasibility study showed our refinery in the UAE, but now we have it in Namibia, using the chlorination and chlorine recycle versus the hydrofluoric, sulfuric acid leach and ammonia precipitation. And our near-term value drivers, we signed our MDA, making us totally shovel-ready in March. We have just completed our capital raise. Post this capital raise, we will have 6.2 million in the bank and 672 million shares on issue. Current share price on 4 September was 3.7 cents, giving that a market cap of 25 million. We are cashed up now and ready to achieve these near-term value drivers on the slide. We are currently working on our advanced sample test work to produce our concentrate, commissioning our lab scale refinery plant to allow the offtake samples and design parameters, working on Namibia EIA, and lastly, in Q1 2024, we will be able to give to the market our updated feasibility study to establish our cost estimates on our capital expenditure and give the market our revised financial model. Thank you so much, and come and say hello to me at our booth. Thank you.
One, two. Okay, sorry, I thought you turned me off there. Now, I didn't, very remiss of me, I didn't announce the rules of engagement for any of our players in the room this morning. So if you are one of our presenters, I have got a little timer up the front here. Eddie alluded to it. So we've got 15 minutes for each of our presentations. I'll ring the bell at 2 minutes. I'll stand at 1 minute. I did not have to stand then at all because my first presenter was well and truly off and racing. So we've got 15 minutes for each of our presenters. Now look at this happy person coming up here on the stage. Back in May, when I last saw her, we were on the road in Sydney for RIU, and there was a really big announcement from this presenter, and there's going to be another one here today at New World Metals. So this is Jeneta Owens. She is joining us on stage in her role as MD for Godolphin Resources. And it's a rare earths, copper and gold explorer, and they're focused on the rapidly advancing Narrabri Rare Earths project, which is within the Lachlan Ford Belt over in New South Wales. At RIU, it was all about the maiden resources. She was happy. As I said, look at the smile now. She's still happy. So this morning, another announcement, which is going to assist them in the expansion. What will it mean for you and what will it mean for the company itself? We're going to find out. And I'm also going to ask all of our presenters just to make sure those microphones are pointed nicely so we get the full extent of what you're saying. Would you please put your hands together, everyone, for Jeneta and Godolphin Resources?
Thank you, Chrissy. There's our disclaimer. You can read that on our website. Now, I'll just go through the investment highlights for Godolphin before I get into the exciting news that we've got today. So we are an exploration company based in the central west of New South Wales, mainly exploring in the Lachlan Fold Belt. So we have copper, gold, base metals and a rare earth project there. We have a local team and we have a lot of specific area experts. So these guys have actually worked in this area for a long time. They've worked on some of the mines in that area, so they know the deposit styles, they know what they're looking for, and that sort of sets us above everyone else. Now, we do work on a multi-discovery strategy, so that is working on projects in the background. When we have exciting news like a maiden resource to announce, we are still progressing our copper and gold base metals projects in the background as well. So we have a stream of rare earth projects and we have the stream of copper and gold projects. And we have active exploration across all of our tenements. So we do still have our geologists getting out and getting boots on the ground, doing geological mapping and working up those targets, getting those drill-ready targets for us to be able to put our drills into. Okay. You have to press the button pretty hard. So we do have a dominant footprint in New South Wales, in the Lachlan Fold Belt, and this is an area where it's known to have historic high-quality mines, such as Cadia, which competes with Kalgoorlie for the largest gold mine in Australia on a yearly basis. We also have the Termingli gold mine operation, North Park's copper porphyry mine, and you can see there we've got in the green our rare earth project. Now, this area is well endowed with metals, and you can see that the project or the suite portfolio that we do have covers off on all of those really critical minerals and things that we're going to need for future technologies such as copper, zinc, and we've also got our gold and the rare earth element project, which I will talk to in more detail. So Godolphin are quite an active explorer, so we are always out in the ground. We do a lot of work and over that period of time, since April last year, we have progressed our projects quite significantly. We have done diamond drilling on our copper projects at Yeovil. We have also, as I mentioned and Chrissy mentioned, we have done diamond drilling which resulted in a maiden resource at Narrabri, our rare earth project. And we've also managed, because we did take that step to do diamond drilling, we've done some initial metallurgical test working, which has been very, very positive. So currently we are in the process of progressing that program further, and we're working on drill plans to increase the size of the resource there at Narrabri. So what are rare earths used for? Most people know about the magnets. Permanent magnets is really the source of what we use the NdPr metals for, but also the heavies, the Tb and the Dy, and sorry, the lights. So actually that says light for both, and Tb and Dy are actually heavies. So we don't often talk about the other industries that these metals are used for. So things like superconductors is very important and a very large market. Medical imaging and electronics. So all of our phones and the process of making things like computers small is all using rare earth elements. Where are we located? So this map is actually produced by the Federal Government of Australia, and you can see that Narrabri has been highlighted as a source of rare earth projects. And this is across several documents that they put out, and some of those being documents that they use to create investment or try and encourage investment from overseas. So it has been listed as a source of critical minerals in Australia. Now the pictures here show our diamond drilling at the project last year. We drilled 31 diamond holes, and that is through the cover sequence. Now Narrabri is a clay-hosted rare earth project, so it is different. There are two general styles of rare earth projects. One is hard rock, such as Linus's project, or another project that a lot of people are familiar with in New South Wales is the Australian Strategic Materials Dubbo Zirconia project. This is different. This is clay hosted. So what actually happens here is the underlying A-type granite weathers over time, and that creates a very thick weathering profile of clay. So it's unconsolidated, and the rare earths actually are mobile within that environment. And what that means is it makes it very easy to mine. You don't have to do drill and blast. You literally go and dig it up and process it. And the processing, again, is quite simplified. We're not talking about having to heat and crack elements. We're just talking about leaching. So you actually leach using different strengths of acids, and the rare earths go into solution, and they call that the pregnant rare earth liquid. Currently, as was mentioned earlier today, The only further processing of these types of products happens in China, but Godolphin, are obviously considering whether we can bring that onshore in Australia and have those final things happening here from a clay perspective, not talking about Linus and their hard rock type of process. So our maiden resource, we've got 94.9 million tonnes at 739 TREO. That includes yttrium, and we have a higher grade core there of over 1,000 ppm TREO. So this was just, this resource was our first go at putting one together based on some historical drilling and the 31 diamond drill holes that we drilled last year. Now, what that did indicate was that we had a 126% uplift in the grade. There was an old historic resource at Narrabri based on a 2004 JORC compliant standards, and they actually had used a hard rock style project and put the wrong criteria onto the project. So being able to look at it now from the perspective of being clay hosted has really uplifted this project and provided a lot of potential. So that does also indicate a 50% of this resource is indicated, which is important for moving it into the study phases, and a 30% increase in tonnage. We haven't closed it off. It is still open in many directions. So we do have a lot of exploration potential in this location. Now you can see there the bottom line talks about the metallurgy. We only put in a few samples just to test, that basic test of whether it can leach or not. And the answer was yes, one of our samples did leach. Some of the samples that we sent, were actually the fresh rock, which we did not expect to leach, but we wanted to ensure that we had a bit of a coverage there across the different lithology types. And getting results such as 94% ND is actually quite significant. A lot of projects don't get those recovery levels. And that was at pH2, which most of the projects or clay projects in Australia are actually looking at leaching at. So follow up, we know that we haven't closed it off. In fact, some of our, one of our highest grade holes sat outside the previous known mineralisation and is open to the north. And you can see potentially from this picture, it's got a sort of a northwest kind of trend to the ore body. So we do want to progress it in that specific direction. Now this image shows some red blotches which sort of indicate high grade, but it is on the 3 layers. What I'd really like to point out is the fact that you've got this blue lower grade in the middle, and that is because that part of the resource is only informed from the historic drilling. So that is historic air core drilling that didn't reach through all the 3 layers that you can see in the long section there. So it really only tested the top and part of the second layer. So something that we can do quite easily is pop a few diamond drill holes in this location that can drill right down through those layers into the bedrock, and that will add grades and tonnes to the resource quite simply. We will also do some extension to the north and northwest. Most recently, we have actually put in an application for some additional ground that became available in New South Wales. So you can see we've got quite a large tenement there. It's 112 square kilometres, which does provide us that expansion into the northwest. Now, this entire tenement is not completely all prospective for rare earths. The top part of the tenement is actually a different granite, which is very interesting in the Narrabri area. From a uniquely geological perspective, there's actually 3 different types of granites, and not all of them are prospective for rare earths. So only the A-type granite. Within this tenement, there is an A-type granite that has never been tested for rare earths. So that we find is really encouraging because we might actually have another source of rare earth elements there. The northern part is actually a I-type granite, which is prospective for things like tin, and there was an old tin mine there back from the historic times that had a small shaft. So that just adds another feather to our bow, and we're really looking forward to getting this granted and start our exploration in this tenement. So now we're looking at our timeline. What are our next steps? And you can see we've got our Narrabri Rare Earth project at the bottom and our major copper and gold projects there underneath. And ultimately, we have got the New South Wales government took all of our core from Narrabri and they scanned it with a method called HiLogger. And that actually maps all the minerals within that hole. And they took the entire lot and have scanned it all, and we are now just going through the final phases of determining what all of those results mean. They're also going to do some additional testing so that we can really understand this style of deposit, because the New South Wales government does see it as being a very strategically important project for New South Wales. There are no other clay-hosted projects at this level in New South Wales, and we are probably the closest to a development timeline in that process. And they would like to, the New South Wales government would like to have critical minerals and those types of projects up and operating and producing in New South Wales. So we have, a fair bit of support from that side, which is fantastic. We have got our metallurgical samples are being prepared to send to ANSTO for our second round of testing. So this is going to be an expanded suite based on lithogeochemistry and also the understanding that what we know from other rare earth or clay type rare earth projects around the world. So that's going to be an expanded suite to what we sent last time, probably about 18 to 20 samples. We are going to continue with our diamond drilling. Now, we have found that diamond drilling is really successful in this type of project. Traditionally, air core is used, but what we have learnt from looking back at the historic work is that air core didn't actually test all of the mineralised layers, and to get the best quality data. So we're also getting close to 100% recovery for testing and understanding the project. Diamond drilling is really the way to go. And we can actually drill a hole a day. So it's quite quick in this unconsolidated kind of environment. So we'll get the assay results back. We'll update our MRE, so we'll put out a new resource based on the additional drilling. Thanks. And we will commence a mining study. Now, on the copper and gold projects, we have recently drilled a couple of diamond holes at our Goodrich project in Yeovil, and we should be seeing assay results from that in about a month's time. So we're pretty excited about that when we were able to see, copper sulfides in the drill holes. We are commencing our planning to do our RC drilling at Cyclops and Yeovil East, and again, those results will come out through the year. So Yeovil is actually quite an exciting project. It does have a small resource on it at the main Yeovil resource, so the 12.8 million tonnes there. And if you turn that into a gold equivalent, which a lot of people do in this area, just because it compares them with Cadia and things like Boda, which is a large discovery by Alkane, our grade is actually higher. So this runs at about 0.8 gold equivalent, which is pretty good for this location. And we have 20 kilometres of strike length of copper mineralisation here at Yeovil, and we're going to be drilling testing 3 projects in between now and Christmas time. So we're pretty excited to be able to bring those results to you over that period of time. High grade core, where everyone likes pretty pictures of some nice minerals. So come and see me at the booth 16 and you can see some more. And, oops, I'm just going to go through the buttons. No one wants to see the investment summary because it doesn't want to come up on the slide, but Chris is standing up, so I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jeneta. And that is the beauty of this conference, is that if there's too much to pack into the speech, there's plenty of time to go out and talk to our presenters at their booth. So for my presenters, don't race, save some more for outside for those gritty conversations after the end of the day. Hello, look at this fellow up here, another smiley guy, Paul. Paul Locke is the Managing Director and the founder of Pan Asia Metals. They've entered into 2 MOUs. One is in Vietnam, and that's with VMS, which is the sister company of VinFast. Now, VinFast is a $105 billion company, and the other one is with IRPC in Thailand. Now, their parent company is PTT, and they are worth $43 billion. So Paul is playing with the big boys now. So let's see what story he's going to tell us and if it's something we would like to be investing in as well. Would you please make him very welcome?
Thanks. Thank you. And thanks to RIU for putting on today, and welcome everyone, fresh and early. If you play with the big boys, maybe you'll become a big boy. That's the philosophy. So that's why I'm there. So you'll see on our cover, we've got Be a Nice Human. So when we interact in our projects are in Southeast Asia, our main projects, it's all about community, etc. And it's about bringing community along with you and building a job environment and so on. So that's what that's about. Cute boy. Pan Asia Metals has two key businesses. Southeast Asia is our primary focus because that's going to get us to cash flow earlier. And then recently we pulled together a suite of assets in Chile, brine and clay, and that's our long-term growth pathway. So we're looking at the near term for cash flow and also into the long term for growth. So EV, is it real? And the reason I put this here is if you look at all our share prices, you'd think it's not, but it is. If I can click this thing here, which I can't. Oops, there we go. In 2022, 700,000 tonnes of LCE was consumed, which is a big step up from the 2015. In 2030, it's meant to be 3.2 million tonnes or thereabouts, and in 2040, 6.6 million tonnes. So in the lithium space, looking to set ourselves up and other companies with big projects for the future, we're looking really good. This thematic is to stick around for a long time. So I often hear, how long can lithium go for? It's got to come off at some point. I think the reality is it's got to go for a long time. And the driver of lithium or new energy vehicles was originally policy environments to bring down GHG emissions. So we've got this chart here and you see that white line with net avoided GHG emissions if we manage to achieve what we're aiming with EVs. So it's material, but what has happened more recently is the driver's wallet is starting to drive EV demand. So drivers are starting to realise, and in states like WA might be a bit less significant because of range anxiety, but in a lot of other countries and cities with big populations, range anxiety is not an issue. With an ICE vehicle, you're losing 80% of your energy before it gets to the back wheels or four wheels. With EVs, it's 33% before regenerative gains, which is typically 10%. So there's a massive uplift in savings. And this is a meme we often see where it's a trainload of EV fuel. Given those savings, given that coal-fired power, even if this was the only source of EV fuel, it is still a better outcome than having ICE vehicles running around everywhere. So, so be it if it's coal, but I don't think it will be. And this is the litmus test. This is a taxi, and taxis are starting to get around in a lot of cities. In Jakarta, Bluebird, the main taxi company, just acquired 500 BYD EVs. If you can make an EV work in Jakarta, which is a low-cost environment, it can work anywhere. So this is really happening. So the next question is, where will all the EVs be made? So we hear a lot of talk about the US and the IRA, EU and the response, but the reality is, at this point, more than 55% of ICE vehicles are made in Asia. And if you look at the Asian policy environment, there's no way they're going to let it go, not without a fight. Very competitive. 90% of 2- and 3-wheelers are made in Asia too. So that's India, China, and Southeast Asia. So this is a massive market. And there's a lot of movement from China, Korea, and Japan into Southeast Asia. This sort of reflects the tiger and cubs effect back in the 80s when we had a lot of, in North Asia, a lot of the higher cost economies moving into lower cost production in Southeast Asia. And we're seeing this with EVs and batteries right now. The red numbers are economic complexity. So quite often I hear people say, someone actually asked me once, do they make cars in Thailand? And I said, well, it's actually one of the most complex industrial environments in the world. You can see Tokyo or Japan's at #1. They've been at #1 forever, so they're the benchmark. But Malaysia and Thailand are 23 and 28, or 28 and 23. And then in Thailand itself, Thailand is the largest auto producer in Southeast Asia, with over 20 companies manufacturing autos there, plus all the infrastructure around it. And if you see the new Mercedes EQS EV on the roads here, which is a pretty flash-looking car, it actually was made in Thailand. BYD, the largest auto producer in China, I think it's the largest EV producer in the world, or second behind Tesla, has a factory under construction in Thailand. And GWN, another large producer, is making ASEAN, or Thailand, its ASEAN EV hub. So there's a lot of activity in this market. And the policy settings are there to attract and hold or convert ICE manufacturers to EV manufacturers. So it's a really busy region, and it's only getting busier. So you might ask, and where are we? Well, we're right in the middle of it, in the thick of it. So in Thailand, we have the Lithium project, and we've got an MOU with IRPC. So I'll talk a bit more on that later, but IRPC is a petroleum and industrial company, and its parent wants to be in EVs a big way. So IRPC is working with Pan Asian Metals. And in Vietnam, we have an MOU with VinES, a sister company to VinFast, to build a standalone conversion facility to produce lithium carbonate to feed their needs and the needs of other customers in Southeast Asia. So back to this slide. In Southeast Asia is our pathway to early cash flow. We're going to get to cash flow first in Southeast Asia. Our key JV with IRPC, or MOU, to enter into a joint venture. IRPC is a $2.1 billion company. Its parent PTT is $43 billion, and PTT has entered into joint ventures with CATL, the largest battery producer in the world, to produce batteries, Foxconn, which makes iPhones and has an EV platform, and Godolphin, which also is a Chinese battery manufacturer to produce batteries. So we're keeping really good company. And here we have a picture of IRPC's, one of their industrial estates. And this is, we just actually did a site visit yesterday with our chemical engineer and our business development rep and the IRPC and PTT crew, looking at where we would be there. This jetty is running at 20% capacity, and the key here is being surrounded by all of your reagents, your inputs, and your market. So this is in Rayong in south of Bangkok, and this is where all the auto manufacturers are here too. So this is basically a pre-licensed industrial centre. And then VinFast in Vietnam, this is opportunistic. With VinES, we've entered into a MOU to build a standalone lithium conversion facility. PFS is nearly delivered. Results look remarkable. But VinES's sister company is a recently NASDAQ listed VinFast, which has got a market cap today of 105 billion Aussie, and Godolphin again 9.3 billion. And it's important because when we're in this network, we start to lean on this network. So when I was looking at IRPC, we've already had discussions with PTT, which is 51% owned by the Thai government, about mining licensing and what we can do to accelerate it and so on. So this network works to our advantage. With VinES is a full-blown battery manufacturer producing handheld batteries, stationary storage batteries, and batteries for its sister company VinFast and other customers in the region. Now, onto our projects. So the Lithium project is located in southern Thailand, has two prospects, the Lithium prospect, which is 10.4 million tonnes of 0.44% Li2O. Don't let the grade get you. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the BT Lithium prospect to the north with 16 to 25 million tonnes at 0.4 to 0.7 as an exploration target, which is drill supported, really important. You can see here, this main road and all these wires actually go past the southern prospect, and you can see all the power lines in there, and we're on a hydro grid. So we're on our way to producing a low carbon product, which is really important. What's really important too is the cost environment. Southeast Asia is a manufacturing hub for one reason, it's a low cost environment. So you might recall there was a headline about MinRes just recently where they want to build conversion capacity in Southeast Asia for cost reasons, and POSCO wants to, or said it could build a conversion capacity in Korea 40% cheaper than it can in Australia. And let me tell you, Korea is expensive compared to Southeast Asia. So when we look at grade, it's not just about grade in tonnes, it's your cost environment, and in some cases that's the most important aspect. So the Lithium prospect has had 102 diamond holes put through it. We're up for a mineral resource upgrade. It's been coming for some time. I know my shareholders are annoyed, but it's very close. And we should see an increase, well, we will see an increase from inferred to indicated and measured, and an increase in tonnes. And on the cross-section on the right, you can actually see that there are intersections in there grading 1% and above. So the reason the grade's low, part of the reason, is it's a pegmatite dike swarm, and our resource model captures all the rubbish in between the pegmatites. So it unduly drops the grade, but you can see that there's composite grades there up to 0.8%. Once again, offsetting the lower grades is a very low cost environment. And then at Bangitum to the north, we're drilling this right now. We're on hole 39. We plan to deliver a mineral resource estimate later this year, and a PFS for both projects for that matter. And we can see it's a pegmatite dike swarm again. From surface, good for open cut. Now, on grade, 0.44%. We put it into ore sorting. We upgrade the grade to 0.92% in this example. We get rid of 60% of the waste, which is all below cutoff, so we lose none of our lithium. Also, in our met test work, we're producing up to a 3.6% concentrate, which for markers is really good. And we're getting up to 87% recoveries, and we've got more work to do. So these are outstanding results. And then lithium into solution right now, we're sitting up to 88%, and more work is being done there. So when we think about tonnes and grade, it's not just tonnes and grade, it's your cost environment and your recoveries. If you've got a really low cost environment and really good recoveries, then lower grade projects start to work really well. And this proves it. This cost curve was put together by Wood Mackenzie. It featured in TRNG's initial public offering document in June 2022. So it measures, this is the hard rock variation of it, and we can see lepidolite sitting here in the middle of the cost curve, very low. I'm going to go fast now because I'm a bit behind. Simple sulfate roast flow sheet, and we've had very high grades up to 2.62% Li2O in our rock chips. So there are very high grades at this project. So now onto pathway to future growth, and I'm going to step back here, and I think Brick Rule said something once about pounce when no one is watching. So back in April this year, when Boric talked about Chile, the whole world was talking about nationalisation, and I went, you beauty, because I had a clear runway to assemble 1,600 square kilometres of prime, low altitude, close to infrastructure, power and roads, brine and clay properties in northern Chile. So we're pretty excited. You can see it there. And Pintados, this is one of the salars we've got 600 square kilometres on, and we've got surface grades up to 2,000 ppm. And then, then at Hilux, we've got a clay project here, which will drill to a resource later this year, 1,000 ppm. Right, now it's not all about projects and stuff, it's about your community. So we've got a big ESG thing underway, and our view is we're not an island. If our community thrives, we thrive. And I'd like to wrap it up there. Explore a better future with Pan Asia Metals, and it doesn't take much to be a really nice person. Thank you.
Brilliant. That was a great slide to finish on. You're so, so true. And I was listening to Joe Lowry's latest podcast drop recently as well, and he was talking about the lepidolite. And so have a listen to that one, and that will tie in nicely with what you're saying as well about the bonuses. Thank you so much for that very interesting conversation. They're heading back out the booth if you'd like to further that one. Now, our next speaker, as he comes up here, has only one fault. I wonder what that might be. He lives in Perth and he doesn't play AFL. He likes rugby. His workmates even told me he's not that great at rugby anymore. I did actually, in your defence, say that was because you were very busy with your new role, your dual role that you've got at the moment with Infinity Lithium. This is Ryan Parkin, everyone. He's actually the Managing Director and the CEO of Infinity Lithium. He's going to talk us through their San Jose Lithium project, which holds the EU's second largest hard rock lithium deposit. It's going to be used as an on-site feedstock for its large-scale, long-life lithium chemical conversion facility. We know that Europe has a huge demand for battery-grade lithium chemicals. It's continuing to grow, and this project is strategically positioned to be a significant contributor. Let's hear more about it. Please welcome Ryan, everyone.
All right, well, yet again, thanks a lot for the kind introduction, Chrissy, and welcome all to the New World Metals Investment Series, whether you're here today or whether you're watching online through the live stream. Before we get started, if you could please note the disclaimer and cautionary statement. This can be found as well on our corporate presentation that was lodged with ASX earlier today. So Infinity Lithium is progressing the world-class San Jose Lithium project, and this project is a fully integrated project located in Spain in the Extremadura region close to the Portuguese border. Now, San Jose is critically essential for Europe and their move in the race towards their goals and aspirations to secure critical raw materials. Of course, lithium is a large part of that. And most importantly, the ability to convert to battery-grade lithium chemicals. And in our case, we are highly focused on battery-grade lithium hydroxide. At San Jose, we have one of Europe's largest lithium resources, and this will be used as a feedstock for a fully integrated lithium chemical processing plant on site. We won't be producing a concentrate. We won't be moving the product elsewhere around Europe or globally. This is about, from cradle to grave, the production of battery-grade products that are urgently needed in Spain and within the European Union. What we have is we have a long-life project and also a resource that remains open at strike and depth. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we refer to our recent securitisation of land and the ability to extend the project. On the project level, we maintain control of the project. We have 75% of that project and also a move to 100% in a clear pathway to total project ownership. Later in the year, we'll be submitting our mining licence application and environmental applications, and we'll be updating our project economics in and around that. Corporately, we're in a strong position with more than $12 million in cash at the end of the financial year. We're led by Adrian Bias, our chairman, who's here with us here today. We've got an exceptional CEO in country, Ramon Jimenez, the ex-CEO of Acciona Industrial and Cobra, two very significant engineering and industrial companies in Spain, who's really been leading the charge in country. We're also led by the highly credentialed John Starink, and he's joined outside the board from our process engineer, Dr. Dave Marie, who is the principal scientist with Talison Lithium. So we have a great team to drive this project forward and move into production in the coming years. So strategically, as I've alluded to, this project is essential for Europe, and this is against the backdrop of competition, a global race for lithium. Ultimately, we see in the press every day, a lot of this being aligned to North America, the Canadian, the Australian markets under the Inflation Reduction Act. But we have seen a response from Europe through the Critical Raw Materials Act and Net Zero Industry Act. But where Europe sits at the moment is they're going to need every gram of battery-grade product that they can get their hands on. And ultimately, San Jose is one of the very few resources in Europe that is available for downstream lithium chemical conversion. Again, this is Europe's second largest hard rock lithium resource. It's going to be used as a feedstock on site for a long life project. And most importantly, this year we've seen some very significant gains politically, administratively, and in terms of our permitting. This has included the granting of a key exploration permit, and we've collaborated with the regional government on what's known as an EIA scoping document. This is to thrash out the finer points of the project, the environmental profile, and this will assist in our mining licence and environmental applications a little later in the year. On the back of these developments, we've moved forward and executed a long-term agreement to secure land from one of the major landowners in the region. Now, this is important because this has been, earmarked for our lithium chemical conversion facility. We'll have a portal adjacent to that industrial facility, and very much with an underground mining activity. From a local community perspective, we've really seen immense social gains in acceptance for the project. We have the ability to extend that lease as well for a further 35 years over and above the initial 35 years. So again, with a resource that remains open at strike at depth, there's an opportunity to really extend this project in perpetuity for the good of the local community and also for the longevity of Europe's needs. Strategically, we continue to engage with a number of potential offtake partners. Vertical integration is an aspiration of all globally, not least so within the European bloc. We have a long-standing non-binding agreement with LG Energy Solutions and a binding agreement with a localised source of green energy, so photovoltaic and green hydrogen, which will be essential for the project moving forward. As I alluded to just before as well, we maintain control of the project. We moved to finalise our payment for that earlier this year, highlighting that move now to total administrative control under our JV, and of course we can move to 100% at any time prior to the final investment decision. The resource itself, it's a lithium-bearing mica ore. So this is a large homogeneous ore body where the resource is located. It was drilled in 2017, and there was additional drilling undertaken in the late 90s, in the early 90s, late 80s by Tulsa Group. So we have more than 12 kilometres of drill data that has defined one of Europe's largest resources. We can see one of the highlights there, 192 metres at 1% lithium oxide. I mean, there's been an extensive program over time. This is really different from your traditional, I guess, pegmatite project that we're familiar with, but ultimately, if this were to be an open pit, it would have a strip ratio of less of 0.5 to 1, so very different to your traditional spodumene play. So we can see here the resource that was defined, 111 million tonnes or 1.6 million tonnes lithium carbonate equivalent. We're looking now at an underground lithium extraction and again to serve as feedstock for a purpose-built plant. So at the end of the day, you know, this is about moving underground, the ability to return our tailings back underground and minimise our surface footprint and deal with the local community to ensure the most socially and environmentally sustainable product. I mean, ultimately this project can grow, but this is a brownfields project. This was a tin mine in the 1960s. You can walk the ground near Caceres, you can see the historical shafts, you can see the head frame, you can see some dilapidated buildings. So ultimately, the move underground has been widely accepted by the local community. In terms of our processing route, we had our test work program funded through ERT Energy, who are linked to the source of European funds, and they are one of our major shareholders. And we have now proven the ability to produce both battery-grade hydroxide and carbonate. You know, most interestingly, led by our world-class technical advisory committee through John and Dave there, we've been exploring other avenues towards leaching and improving recoveries. And we're expecting to update the market with some of those outcomes through our R&D activities, which we think will change the project and ultimately see much higher recoveries and change the energy matrix as we move forward. I mean, ultimately, this is going to feed into a Class 4 feasibility study, and we'll be looking to update the market on the optionality between the processes as we move forward to lodge our environmentals and mining licence later in the year. So our permitting, where have we been? We had a key exploration permit awarded earlier in the year, really illustrated there by that purple box, and ultimately you can see it includes a resource area but a far greater area than previous tenements. It's using this administratively. We've negotiated an outcome with the government for a direct exploitation concession application, and we're also going to be using this environmental impact assessment scoping document to shape our needs and requirements for these key applications. So ultimately the idea being, with that input from the outset, we're going to have an accelerated end permitting outcome. The land acquisition is a really key part of that. You can see it there denoted in the orange. That accounts for more than a third of our surface tailings area and also where the lithium chemical conversion plant will be located. So ESG is obviously a huge part of every project and not least so in Europe. You know, we moved underground, there's no disturbance of the surface that will be visible to the local community. We will have a portal adjacent to the industrial activity. And ultimately changing the surface profile through returning a lot of that by way of paste infill will also be accompanied by work that we're currently undertaking for our byproducts. So a lot of this byproduct can be used in the construction, chemical and agricultural industries. In terms of movement of material, we've got a fully integrated project on site. So we're able to use that feedstock, concentrate it and consume it on site. We're not having to move a concentrate halfway around the world or even vast distances for the production of battery grade products. And of course, we're close to those key NDU markets where ultimately this product will eventuate. We have a localised source of power. We align to some industrial heavyweights, an IBEX 35 company, and also the largest private extra-Maduran company in a joint venture to secure a PPA. Regionally, we've been working closely to become the employer of choice. This is an enormous project for the local community. This is a region that suffers from high levels of unemployment, some of the highest levels of support within Europe, and huge depopulation issues. So we're working on community incentives, we're working with business associations, the Chamber of Commerce, various industry groups, and most importantly, we're undertaking training and development, not only for the mining and lithium chemical conversion, but also for other areas in the renewable landscape. Our project economics are from 2021, using obviously some dated pricing assumptions there at $17,000 a tonne. We're in a very different pricing environment where we sit at the moment, but also a higher inflationary environment. So we'll be looking to update those project economics in the later part of this year, and also incorporating some technological advancements. So really, why is this important? I mean, why is this strategically essential for Europe? And you can see there that Spain is the second largest automaker within Europe and the 9th largest globally. And within Spain, you can see they're having to change their value chain entirely from an ICE mindset now to building their own battery capacity. And Spain is one of the very few nations within the 27-member bloc of the EU that actually has a lithium resource. So this is all about building prosperity as they move forward. It currently represents 10% of their GDP. They're targeting 15% of that GDP, and that's going to require building the value chain from the ground up. Within Europe, we're going to need more than 1 million tonnes of battery-grade lithium chemicals by 2030. And that's pretty much on par with current global production, which is entirely dominated by China, and seeing North America move very aggressively. The Critical Raw Materials Act that was tabled earlier this year has highlighted some recent and lofty targets, and ultimately 10% of raw material extraction will have to come from the block, 40% of that processing capacity. So assume by 2030, Europe's going to need 400,000 tonnes of battery-grade lithium chemicals that are converted within the block. So a very significant target. So just finally on the roadmap forward, we've had some key gains this year in terms of our permitting, our political engagement, administrative progression, and we're working hard in the background with our technical advancements. We'll be moving forward to lodge our Class 4 feasibility study with the market, and ultimately lodging our exploitation concession application. We remain engaged in active discussions with strategic partners, and ultimately this is a really exciting space for the company to be in, ultimately as we move forward now to these targets. So look, really just to recap where we've been, a long life, fully integrated project, strategically essential for Europe, and ultimately, we're looking forward to updating the market over the coming months on some of those more recent gains. Thanks a lot, Chrissy, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much too, because the big fella here actually put off his trip. He's off to, you're off to Spain this weekend, aren't you? Yeah, so he's off for 5 weeks. So we look forward to the news stream that comes out of that too. Good luck over there. And you missed the hot, hot summer, which is very wise, I think, as well. All right. Scotty Williamson, Managing Director of Blackstone Minerals, is next up on stage. Now, Blackstone Minerals is an Australian-based battery materials developer, and they're focused on building an integrated mining and refining business in Vietnam. And today they've put out an announcement around a rare earth opportunity, which I'm sure Scott will give us first dibs on during the course of this speech. Would you please make him very welcome, everyone?
Thanks, Chrissy. Thanks to Vertical Events for the opportunity to present, as always. Great to be up here. We'll talk a little bit about the rare earths later on, but the main flagship asset we've got here is the previously operating Banfuk nickel mine, the Tarkwar nickel project. So previously operating between 2013 and 2016. The previous owners sunk over $100 million into the capital infrastructure. You can see there they've built a small concentrator and an underground mine. They depleted the underground mine and they left behind a very large opportunity, and we'll talk about that today. So we're looking to restart this mine, but also looking to build a downstream refinery to convert the nickel concentrate into the chemical products required for the lithium-ion battery. So you can see here, Northern Vietnam is our flagship. That's where we were looking to restart the mine and the refinery. We're looking to bring in third-party feedstock from around the world. So 50% of our feed will come from third-party feedstock providers in Australia and Canada. We've made some strategic investments in Nico in Western Australia. So Nico is an ASX-listed company. 2 in Manitoba. So we've got Corazon listed on the ASX and Flying Nickel listed on the TSX. So the idea is that these are potential feedstock partners for our downstream refinery in Vietnam. Positioned at the moment. At the end of the quarter, we had around $13 million of cash, so still a very strong cash position to get us through the final stages of our studies. So those listed investments there sit around $11 million there in listed investments. So fairly low EV at the moment. Very supportive shareholder base, Deutsche Balaton out of Germany, Fidelity, one of the largest institutions in the world, Nanja Savetta out of Hong Kong. So very supportive institutional shareholder base. A board and management team that's been around for a long time. So we've got a blend of geology, mining engineering and corporate governance. A recent addition was Dan Locker, who was the Managing Director of Western Areas, which was one of Australia's most successful nickel mining companies, and Dan was the MD CEO for over 10 years there. Plenty of analyst coverage there on the sell side as well. So you can see here we're in the northern Vietnam region. We're out to the west of Hanoi, where we have the previously operating nickel mine. We have a large nickel sulfide district. We have around 485,000 tonnes of nickel in resource, and about half of that goes into inventory and reserve. So well positioned with that mine restart opportunity, and then looking to build the refinery about 50 kilometres downstream. So the mine and the refinery are actually connected by a large river. One of the benefits of operating in this region is that river has two of the largest hydropower plants in Southeast Asia. So we have abundant renewable hydroelectric power. And the refinery is where we're going to produce a precursor cathode active material, or a PCAM, and it has nickel, cobalt and manganese in the ratio of 8:1:1. So the refinery will produce around 40,000 tonnes per annum of nickel, and half of that will come from our Ta Qua nickel project, the mine in Vietnam, and half will be imported feedstock. So you can see here, that's our business model. We're looking to bring in the feedstock from third-party concentrate feed providers. We have relationships with Trafigura, and we're talking to all of the major nickel trading groups. They're very keen to feed their nickel products into our refinery. We have those three strategic interests. We have the Ta Qua nickel project, and they will all combine feedstock into this Ta Qua refinery. We will convert the nickel concentrate to a nickel sulfate, and then we'll convert the nickel sulfate and combine that with the cobalt and manganese sulfate in the ratio of 8:1:1. And this is a movement towards a high nickel cathode, and this is all driven by range anxiety. So the future of the lithium-ion battery is a high nickel cathode, particularly if you want long range vehicles, and the premium brands are all about long range. And so the benefit we have is we've got that abundant hydroelectric power. We're looking at a full electric mining fleet in our study work. Very committed to net zero. We believe that we can move towards net zero even from day one. So there's a great opportunity here to be one of the cleanest and greenest nickel mine and refining businesses in the world. The benefit of that hydroelectric power is it's also driving a low operating cost. So our power cost is around 7 cents per kilowatt hour, significantly cheaper than our peers who are running on fossil fuels. We have abundant competitive labour as well. So we've got some very skilled people in Vietnam, very strong mining, metallurgy, chemical engineering, geology skill set. So that's driving very low operating costs. So we're looking to be in the first quartile cost position from a nickel sulfate perspective. So this is the cost curve for nickel sulfate. So you can see the middle of that cost curve is where you've got your Indonesian nickel laterites. Our view is that if you want to be in those lower quartiles, you want nickel sulfide, and our strategy is really driven by that ability to use the nickel sulfide efficiently. It's a much more efficient process. The hydromet process that we're removing the smelting, which is a technology that is used for stainless steel. So we're going directly into a hydromet chemical process, and that's what's also driving those low operating costs. And that's also what's driving this low CO2 footprint. So this is some work done by a group called Minviro. They're the world leaders in life cycle analysis of greenhouse gas emissions. We can see there we've got a pathway to net zero. Most importantly, we've got the lowest CO2 footprint nickel in the industry. That has been independently verified by the Nickel Institute. So significantly lower than our peers in Australia and Indonesia. So you can see there, that we're much lower than our peers in Australia who are using the smelting process, and they're using fossil fuels to power their processing facilities. Indonesian HPAL is about over two times the CO2 footprint, and the Indonesian RKEF process, which is a nickel pig iron to matte process, is 6 times the CO2 footprint. That nickel is just not going to reach into a premium brand electric vehicle like a BMW or a Mercedes. So what we're seeing is those premium brands are mandating their battery manufacturers to have a CO2 footprint threshold, and what we're seeing is that the only way you're going to achieve that threshold or lower is through nickel sulfide. So this is why you want nickel sulfide, is because it will have a much lower CO2 footprint in the final product in the electric vehicle. So this is our region. So we've got a number of different ore bodies. We've got two different types of nickel sulfide. We've got disseminated nickel sulfide and massive sulfide as well. The massive sulfides are smaller underground mines. The disseminated sulfides are large open pit mines. The flagship asset is Banfuk, the Banfuk disseminated, and that's where we've got around nearly 500,000 tonnes in the Banfuk disseminated. So that's our flagship asset. Then we've got small underground mines at King Snake, Ban Chang. Ban Kwa is, we're not sure whether that'll be an open pit or an underground at this stage. So a number of different ore bodies. We've got two types. We've got the underground massive sulfides and the large-scale disseminated open pits. So this is Banfuk. It's similar to a Mount Keith style. So Mount Keith, one of Nickel West's flagship assets, been operating for decades. Very similar grade to what we're looking at here. So large-scale bulk open pit mining, low strip ratio, less than 3 to 1, 10-year mine life, 18,000 tonnes per annum. So we've got a great resource there as our flagship asset, which will be feeding the majority of the nickel into our downstream refinery. And this is what the refinery and the flow sheet looks like. So you produce nickel concentrate at the mine level. That's a very conventional crush grind flotation circuit. You get your concentrate grade around 10 to 12%. Then you go into the downstream pressure oxidation process. Pressure oxidation is a tried and tested technology used since the 1960s. So there's nothing new here or novel about this flow sheet. We're using solvent extraction, which is also well tried and tested through base metals. So we're stripping out the metals through solvent extraction. We're stripping out copper, the nickel, the cobalt. The nickel and the cobalt, we're producing nickel sulfate in solution. We can drop them out as crystals, so they can be their own products. Ideally, we keep them in solution, then we mix them together to produce the NCM 811 product. So we'll need to bring in some manganese sulfate, and then we can produce that final product being NCM 811. That product trades at a 20 to 40% premium to the underlying metal prices. So it's a premium product, it's a battery grade product, and it trades at a significant premium to the LME nickel price. The other benefit of this flow sheet is it's very flexible on feedstock. So the benefit of having a hydromet process with the pressure oxidation is we can feed in nickel concentrates that are not suitable for the smelting industry. For example, a high arsenic or a high MgO concentrate that is not suitable for smelting or the stainless steel industry, we can use that in this refinery. So we can go and purchase concentrates at a significant discount because of those deleterious elements. They're actually not deleterious for our flow sheet. So our flow sheet, we can take those non-desired concentrates. We can also take MHP, a mixed hydroxide precipitate. That's the product that's coming from the nickel laterite. Nickel matte, which is the product coming from a nickel smelter. And then we've got black mass, which is the recycled lithium-ion battery product. So it's a very flexible flow sheet. These products all trade at different payabilities, so we can arbitrage the market depending on the payabilities of these different products. For example, MHP was trading at 90 to 100%. It's now trading at 65%. So we can bring in MHP when the payabilities are low, or we can bring in nickel concentrate when the MHP payabilities are high. So we can arbitrage the payabilities on these different products into our refinery. So it's been a big 4 or so years. We acquired this asset It had no resources at the time. We've drilled 100,000 metres. We moved directly into scoping studies, pre-feasibility studies. We've completed pre-feasibility studies on the upstream and the downstream, so the mine and the refinery. We're nearing completion of a definitive feasibility study on the refinery. And that has taken 12 months of piloting. So we've done a significant amount of work to get this flow sheet and this project up to a world-class standard. So we're working on the final stages of the studies. It's all about locking in a large partner. That partner will come from the downstream industry, most likely from Korea, Japan or China. This industry is based around those three countries, and we're well positioned in the northern Vietnam region on the doorstep of all of these major lithium-ion battery players. So we're looking at bringing in cathode or battery manufacturers or even electric vehicle manufacturers into our partnership structure. They will bring funding, but they'll also bring some of the expertise in producing these chemical products for their lithium-ion batteries. And so, as I said, we'll quickly talk about the rare earth opportunity. So this was an opportunity that was brought to us by a local Vietnamese rare earth refinery. So this is one of the only rare earth refineries outside of China. They came to us and said, we would like to access some of these ore bodies in Vietnam, and we need your mining capabilities so that we can work as a partnership. They will bring the downstream and the midstream. We will bring the upstream and the mining. We've also brought in ASM, which is another ASX listed company. So we've got the ability to go from the mine all the way through to the downstream products in the rare earth industry. What's also interesting with this opportunity is that some of the best rare earth deposits in the world are in Vietnam. So we've got major opportunities in hard rock and ionic clays. So watch this space. This is a world-class opportunity. And the only reason we've been given this opportunity is because of our strong operating history in Vietnam. So just to finish up, we've got a vertically integrated mining and refining business backed by that abundant hydroelectric power, a globally significant nickel sulfide district, a first quartile cost position with one of the lowest carbon footprints in the industry, and it's a partnership-led model. So don't worry about the CapEx because we will bring in major partners that will help with the funding, and we're well positioned to do that over the coming months. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Love it. New word to add to our lexicon, deleterious. You can use that one today. You can wax lyrical. Now, we've got morning tea about to kick off in next door. What we're doing is we've got one of our presenters stay where you are, sir, unless you're getting me a sausage roll. You getting me a sausage roll? I'm bringing it back. Okay. We've got someone who's had to pull out for a medical reason in the next section. I'll let you know about that a bit later. So we're going to hold our morning tea a little bit later. So you're not missing out. Everything's been kept warm for us, which is good because this talk is one I know you want to have a bit of a listen to, because as investors sitting here today in this room, something we wish that we could know that would guide our investments, of course, is the potential direction of the prices of the minerals and chemicals that we're looking to invest in. Where are they headed? Up, down? And there's been a bit of a wild ride, to put it mildly, for lithium, the lithium family in particular. Enter our keynote speaker today. So this is Dr. Cameron Perks. He's a principal analyst. He's responsible for lithium supply, demand and price forecasting cost modelling with Benchmark Mineral Intelligence. And he's involved in strategic consulting services for clients that range all the way through from junior lithium explorers through to automakers. He has a PhD in environmental engineering. He is also a geologist. He's a geophysicist. And today, he's using his best dad jokes to create a keynote speech entitled, it's only 48 hours since Father's Day as well. So the talk is entitled Lithium, the Element of Surprise. Please make him welcome.
Thanks for that. So definitely not really a geologist anymore. Can I maybe get a quick show of hands of who here is maybe a geologist, engineer, or someone technical who works in the lithium space? Or okay, and anyone here that could consider themselves sort of medium or maybe even new entrants to lithium? Anybody here that wouldn't know too much about lithium? Maybe one or two. Okay. I think there were a couple of people that did the same, the hand for both. That's okay. So I've got some basic slides to build up the picture a little bit from the beginning, but not too much. So I'll mention just maybe to start things off with, lithium is used essentially because of its innate molecular properties in the lithium-ion battery for electric vehicles. I'll get into that a little bit more. And lithium is essentially either mined or evaporated from a brine essentially in South America. Australia is a dominant producer of lithium, but then there's also lithium that comes out of Africa, comes out of, essentially lithium is everywhere, but the issue will be to economically extract lithium from the ground, as I'll get into. Touching first on demand, it's essentially a geographically diverse demand story, but one which is dominated currently by China. You'll also notice that demand is dominated by NCM and LFP demand in the short, the medium, and in the long term. What do those mean? Those are essentially types of cathodes that will have different properties when used in electric vehicles. The type of lithium required for either LFP or NCM or any of the others will depend on the type of cathode will mean that the type of chemical required will be different for LFP versus NCM. So for example, an NCM cathode in general will require a lithium hydroxide, and LFP will generally require a lithium carbonate. And this is, I'm trying to be as simple and high level here as possible just to paint that broad picture. And what this doesn't say is that in terms of a lithium carbonate or a lithium hydroxide supply picture, in China, there is an ability to produce one or the other fairly flexibly. So I'm not necessarily too concerned about the lithium carbonate hydroxide supply and demand balance per se. But I am here on this slide at least concerned with the fact that the supply chain is somewhat dominated by China, and that statement that carbonate, hydroxide, that flexibility to produce for LFP or NCM, it's important to note that China is dominant here in a sense. So if the graph on the right looked very different in the sense that EU or North America was increasingly dominant, the mix between LFP and NCM may increasingly become more important, and the choice between a lithium carbonate or a lithium hydroxide will increasingly become important for project developers. But as we stand today in 2023, it's not necessarily so important. Lithium carbonate comes out of brine. You can produce a lithium hydroxide from a lithium carbonate. You can produce a lithium carbonate or a hydroxide from a spodumene or from a mica, from a hard rock source essentially. You can essentially produce whatever it is that you like, but generally we think about lithium hydroxide being related to spodumene and lithium carbonate to relate to a brine. So the geolocation of where the lithium comes out of the ground relative to where it's then being used, which is what we're showing here, is an important one to just keep in mind as I go through these slides. As I mentioned very briefly at the beginning, lithium is primarily being used in lithium-ion batteries, and lithium-ion batteries are being primarily used in electric vehicles due to its innate properties, its density, its weight, its the power that it can provide in cars. And essentially that goes towards answering the question of why not sodium-ion, or why not hydrogen, or why not something else. It's just that lithium-ion batteries over the last decade or so have just become a dominant technology. It's not to say that we can't use other technologies, but it is just so useful this is 2030 and we don't see this sort of trend slowing down. So EV dominant as the end use demand driver for lithium going forward, well out into the future. And then stepping back, you've got LFP, NCM, and that's somewhat derived by what we see in the plans from cathode producers and cell makers and even car makers in terms of what they're planning to use in their cars, LFP or NCM, and then that will result in, whether we're going to need lithium carbonate or hydroxide, and it turns out to be split fairly evenly. And then down the bottom, we have a industrial end use for lithium, of course, as well, or so-called industrials. Increasingly, or increasingly a smaller and smaller portion of overall demand for lithium, but still an important one. Some context of where we've come from to where we are today in terms of pricing. Those are the orange and blue lines, the squiggly lines going up. Simply put, the demand picture was what really spurred lithium prices into doing what they did in 2022. And lithium supply was always going to take some time to respond. It's not such a simple task to either turn on new mines, let alone expand existing mines. Eventually, as they say, high prices solve high prices, and supply has started to come online, but that's not the full story when we look at 2023 and we see prices declining. Part of the reasons why we saw prices decline in 2023, and I put 2020 in here too so that you can see contextually that prices in 2023, while lower than 2022, at least on a spot basis, are still comparatively much higher than 2020s and 2021, making many projects, or if not all projects, quite profitable and looking quite attractive, I suppose. The other it's a very simple graph. All this is displaying is China's monthly NEV production. Of course, there are other regions around the world, Europe, North America, not so important at the moment, will increasingly be, and therefore increasingly important for things like cathode chemistry. But for China, NEV production on a monthly basis has been increasing even month on month, year on year. It has been getting good. So why have prices been declining recently? We'll hopefully answer that through the subsequent slides. But one of the main things is something that we can't put our finger on in terms of a fundamentals basis. In terms of supply and demand, it's very much a psychological thing that's been happening since early January, when prices went to $80 a kilogram. Many of our clients were asking us, why can't prices go to $100 a kilogram? Why can't they go to $200 a kilogram? Why not $1,000 a kilogram? What's stopping you from essentially forecasting prices going to that level? Similarly, what's stopping prices from going down back to $10 a kilogram? Well, hopefully I'll answer that too in subsequent slides. There is, of course, not just NEV supply in China and price. It of course does also come down to the supply and demand balance, the supply response time for demand. This is our base case demand. It's essentially fairly flat for the short to the medium term. We're actually forecasting a balanced market in 2024, 2025. But maybe what's more important about this particular slide is that there's a high case demand scenario, which is not just based on a simple percentage higher than base case. It's actually, what do we envisage as being demand potentially if OEM targets and government targets and ambitions are met. So this is what governments and OEMs are saying they want to do, and that's how it translates into lithium demand, versus where we're really saying lithium demand will be in reality, according to how many cell and cathode plants are really being built around the world, and how does that all factor in with macroeconomic conditions and people's buying behavior and so on. That goes into our base case. But it's there to illustrate. I think it's an important one to just keep in mind that the world is dynamic, and we're trying to model model that statically in a graph. So supply will come from various places, and what this graph is trying to show you is that despite the energy density and the efficiency of lithium going into the cathode improving, so the amount of lithium going into cathode declining, we still have a base case demand or increasing throughout the future. What sort of supply will come up to meet that kind of demand? Will it come from new greenfield projects, expansions from brownfield projects? It looks to me like by 2039, 2040, we're going to see a lot of recycling in that picture. So there's a big risk in that too. So if we're dependent on something like recycling, which is also dependent on the economics of its lithium extraction and the technology being used in that recycling, there's a big risk that that lithium supply will be in fact lower than where we have it there in that graph. DLE make up a small portion of that too and does present some technological risks. But other than that, there are some, not that it isn't a tried and tested technology, it's just that each individual brine is different and will potentially take more time to ramp up than what's being said. So there are delays that could be exacerbated within the supply ramp up and change how this graph looks. Geographically, lithium can come from anywhere, as I mentioned, all across the world. It's about extracting it economically. In Africa, there's plenty of spodumene, there's plenty of mica, in South America, there's plenty of brine. But as you would note, we could maybe skip ahead to this graph where it shows you that each individual brine is unique in its own right. So it's magnesium content, it's sulfate content, it's all the other smaller elements, and it's maybe even the evaporation rates present in that environment, not to mention the geopolitical aspects in some countries that some of these brines are located in. This sort of separates you out in terms of country, but you could also separate these out in terms of a technology, extraction technology that's being planned to be employed here, and you'll find that many of them with a higher magnesium content will require, or lower lithium content as well, will require a special technology to be able to extract them, and not necessarily just a conventional evaporative route. So this is all just to explain that there are some supply risks in terms of supply coming online to meet demand, even though I've said that we're forecasting 24, 25 to be a balanced market. Similarly, there are demand side risks. So we've got the macroeconomic conditions that I've mentioned that we're all familiar with, particularly in China. We've got cautious buying now that prices are once again sort of declining in China, and the Chinese don't like to buy when prices are declining. And you've got strong progress from projects in Zimbabwe and in China. So this is a representation, I guess, of where lithium is coming from today to demonstrate that lithium supply is geopolitical. It's located in China, it's in Africa, it's in South America, it's in Australia. Zimbabwe and China are ramping up with Chinese projects to come online in 2024, 2025, and hence why we've got a balanced market in those years. But you'll see that there's a difference too between mine supply and chemical supply. China increasingly dominant in terms of chemical supply. And if you took the lithium chemicals that are present in South America, being extracted from South America, and you counted the minerals the proportion of those chemicals that then further need to be purified in China, the graph on the right would be actually a lot more, there'd be a lot more yellow on that graph. So China being increasingly dominant in terms of mine supply and chemical supply. This is broken down geographically. If we looked at in terms of ownership levels, say for Chinese projects in, say, Africa, for example, that yellow again would be a lot thicker in terms of the mine supply. Further supply risks in terms of where we will see new supply coming from. It's not going to cost what we're saying that it will cost in 2020 or 2021 when these feasibility studies were done. Feasibility studies are now being updated, and they're showing that there has been systematic underestimation of capital costs in many projects, and there are other factors as well. Some of those I've listed up there on the right that I have talked about, but some of them not. Perhaps we can discuss after this talk if you'd like to talk through some of those factors that may risk some of the supply coming online on time going forward. As I mentioned, the demand outlook is positive in terms of NEV supply, NEV production sales, but at the same time, there are risks towards the second half of 2023 if we're looking at EV sales and we're looking at EV production and we're thinking about, sorry, I know you're walking towards me, but I feel like some of the subsidies that were in play in 2022 that really helped that 2022 number pop up towards the second half of the year may not be present in 2023. So there are also demand risks. There are big risks in forecasting. And so it's not a very exciting conclusion, because I know at the beginning of the talk we said, where are prices going? Where are where is supply and demand going? Where is the market going? I think we're in a bit of a unfortunately in an area where we actually do have strong EV production, NEV supply, demand for NEVs. We have slow supply response. We have battery grade versus technical grade. We have all that, but it's balanced out by negative macroeconomic conditions, cautious buying, and so forth. So it's very hard to get all that in 15 minutes, but hopefully in 16 minutes, I mean, so thank you. Thank you.
Well, you held their attention, although it would have been off for the sausage rolls otherwise. So we'll be back. Oh, you'll hear me ring the bell, probably about 20, 25 minutes. We'll keep it a little bit